The oracle that the prophet Habakkuk saw. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen? Or cry to you violence, and you will not save? Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me. Strife and contention arise. So the law becomes slack, and justice never prevails. The wicked surround the righteous, therefore judgment comes forth perverted. I will stand at my watchpost and station myself on the rampart. I will keep watch to see what he will say to me and what he will answer concerning my complaint. Then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so that a runner may read it. For there is still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Look at the proud. Their spirit is not right in them, but the righteous live by their faith. This is God's good word for us, God's beloved people. Thanks be to God. Amen. So, middle school me had two varieties of heroes. On one hand, I was really into the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson and John Adams and George Washington and Alexander Hamilton. I was really into, still kind of am, really into those guys. Those guys were definite heroes of mine. It is how I ended up at the College of William and Mary, because that's where Thomas Jefferson went. This had like a deep impact on my life. But the other group of people that middle school me really cared about were baseball players. I was really into baseball. I still am really into baseball. But like a biography of Babe Ruth was one of the first chapter books I ever read. And one of the first ever grown-up books I was given on tape, as a book on tape, was Hank Aaron's autobiography. And so it was like a first grader. When I couldn't sleep, I would listen to Hank Aaron tell me stories about his life and what it was like coming up through the Negro Leagues and what it was like playing for the Braves and what it was like setting all those home run records as a black man in America. And like that was really foundational. And then when I did make it to middle school, the Astros were just amazing. They're the best they had ever been up until that point. They are now the best they have ever been. But up until that point, it was the best they'd ever been. And baseball tickets were dirt cheap. And so for like $7 a head, we could go sit by the air conditioning system in the Astrodome and peer down to these very small squiggles that I were told were the Astros and watch them play. And we could do that all the time because for $24 my whole family could go or whatever. And so Craig Biggio and Jeff Bagwell were household names and household heroes of mine. And so I got really into all those home run records that fell as I was growing up, as Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire were each taking their collective swings at Roger Maris's home run record of 61 in a season. They were out of market games, but they were in our division, and so I would watch, Sammy Sosa hit one, and then we'd watch the Cardinals game, and Mark McGwire would hit one, and then Sammy Sosa would hit two one night, and then Mark McGwire would come back, and it was just watching this race day after day, and I knew who Roger Maris was, and I knew what the record was, and I thought it would never fall, and as I'm watching this, it was just this amazing time. And then there was this guy playing for the Giants, Barry Bonds, who year after year after year was adding home runs and adding home runs and adding home runs on his march to passing 755, the record of my hero, Hank Aaron. I don't have those joyful memories of that time anymore. Because those men I just named, Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, Barry Bonds, cheated. They took steroids. That's why Sammy Sosa and Mark McGwire were really huge across here and really narrow across here, because that's what happens to bodybuilders that use steroids. That's the shape of a steroid human. And so they took steroids. And that's why Barry Bonds could keep hitting all those home runs, even though he was just kind of a lump of a man. He could keep hitting those home runs year after year, well past when most players retire, because the steroids were continually rejuvenating his body. And it was a big deal to me when the Houston Astros got Andy Pettitte and Roger Clemens from the Yankees. We never got Yankee players. We were not very good. We were kind of a back market team, weirdly, for the fourth largest city in the country. But we got 2 Yankees pitchers, and they were amazing. And they're part of what made the Astros the best they'd ever been. But we got them so late in their career, and they were so good because they too took steroids. They cheated. And so I was left with this feeling as I watched these hearings unfold, and I watched the lawsuits, and I watched it all play out. How can this stand? How can they have taken this game that admittedly I absolutely love and pervert something so beautiful? Yes, I know baseball is boring, but it is also beautiful. It is a beautiful game, and it got perverted by these guys who cheated and essentially stole these records from men who fought hard for them and who were my heroes. That Barry Bonds will always be listed as above Hank Aaron on the home run list will always offend me. They cheated. And I was left, I'm still left, with this righteous anger of how can these records stand? How can we stand for it? How could the MLB management allow it to happen? Why are we letting them stay on the list? Thankfully, the sports writers seemingly won't let them into the Hall of Fame. And I'll admit, I know this is controversial in the sports world, but I'm thankful for that because they shouldn't get that honor of standing there in Cooperstown with their plaques next to all of those people who did not cheat to earn those records. And so this kind of righteous anger, this kind of anger where you want to shout and go, how could you let this happen? How long is this going to stand? Why does this happen? This kind of righteous anger, that's the kind of righteous anger that is happening in Habakkuk. This is the kind of mad that Habakkuk is. Probably even more so, because I admit the scale of crimes he's looking at much bigger than my baseball-related crimes. But I'm trying to use an analogy. But Habakkuk is deeply angry. Problem with looking at Habakkuk, other than the fact that no one looks at Habakkuk, is we don't know that much about the real Habakkuk, of who he was. All we get is that sentence I read as verse 1, an oracle that the prophet Habakkuk saw. Here's the things we know about Habakkuk. He was a prophet, his name was Habakkuk, and he saw an oracle. That's it. We have no other biography. We don't really know what kings he worked alongside. We don't know where he was born. We don't know who his father was. We don't know. We think he might have been connected to the temple because his prophecies sound kind of like Psalms. And so we think, oh, this guy read the Psalms a lot, or maybe he helped edit collections of Psalms. And so maybe that, but that's like a huge 3 steps away from reality guess. What the biblical scholars tend to land is on one of 2 related answers. Either Habakkuk was always in the 500s BC, but right before the Babylonians show up. Babylonians show up in 586 and knock down Jerusalem. So one theory in the scholarship is Habakkuk is writing right before the Babylonians show up, looking at how bad things are, right before God answers the question, this is what I'm going to do. I'm sending the Babylonians to knock these people over. Or Habakkuk is writing after Babylon has arrived, looking at what the Babylonians are doing to the people. I vastly prefer option 1. I think that makes more sense for what Habakkuk says. Because what Habakkuk seems to say is, y'all know better than this. Why are you acting like this? Not, you don't know any better, why are you hurting us? So the way I read this is Habakkuk is looking around the state of Judah at the time and just is horrified at what he is seeing. He is seeing Jews who have been given the good and perfect law. They've been given the Torah. They've been given Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Deuteronomy, right? They know what they're supposed to do. They know that it is from God, and they are deliberately not doing it, and people are getting hurt. And it is God's people doing violence to God's people. And he, as many prophets get upset about this kind of thing, he is really upset. But the prophecy that we get, the words of Habakkuk, the page and two and a half pages of Habakkuk that we have, he is not yelling at the people. He is done yelling at the people. No, Habakkuk is yelling at God, because Habakkuk doesn't think that God is doing enough to stop the people-on-people violence that he is watching play out before him. That's what's happening in verses 1 through 3. He is bringing a lawsuit the way often prophets do. They bring lawsuits, and usually prophets bring lawsuits against the people. No, Habakkuk, gutsy move, bringing a lawsuit against God. Here again, verses 1 through 3. The oracle that the prophet Habakkuk saw. Literally all we know about Habakkuk. O Lord, how long shall I cry for help, and you will not listen, or cry to you violence, and you will not save? And then now I imagine he's sitting on the edge of the wall, head in hands. This makes great for the audio listeners. Why do you make me see wrongdoing and look at trouble? Destruction and violence are before me, and strife and contention arise. Habakkuk, real mad, really hates seeing the people getting hurt by the people over and over and over again. Hates seeing this good and beautiful law that God has given perverted time and time and time and time again. And so finally, he reaches this point like maybe many of us have reached when we look at the wrongdoing of the world and go, God, what are you doing? Where are you? When are you going to fix this? This is terrible. Do you not see how bad it is? Pause to remember, this is written in the Bible, so this kind of talk with God, totally okay. Because the next slide is not, and now a picture of Habakkuk getting zapped by God. No, I don't have a slide like that, because that doesn't happen to him. He brings this lawsuit against God. God does not zap him. We're going to get to what God says, and God's answer sounds maybe a little sarcastic, as sometimes God sounds, but he cries out to God. He yells at God. He lets God have it. And he's allowed to live and simply gets an answer about faithfulness. The book of Job does not go, Job cried out to God, and then God zapped him. No, the book of Job says, Job cries out to God, and then God goes, hey, do you know how to create the universe? Did you measure its span? Did you dig the depths of the deep? If you did, okay, but I don't think you did. Now listen to me, right? He gets ask a stupid question, get a stupid answer. But he doesn't get zapped. Jesus in the Garden of the Gospel of Matthew does not end, Jesus cried out to God in the Gospel and then fell over dead. No. So it is okay. Lesson 1, it is okay to talk to God like this. You might not get the answer you want. And the answer you may get, like the parents looking over their glasses at you, might be a little snippy, but you're going to get an answer. Because what Habakkuk is basically one parent giving a look to the other parent to do something about the child that is acting up. God does answer Habakkuk. Habakkuk, deeply offended, deeply convicted about the state of the world, cries out to God. God answers. And that's what verses 2 through 4 is. That's what that other section is God's answer. Habakkuk is standing on the gate waiting for the oracle of the Lord, and the oracle of the Lord comes to him. Then the Lord answered me and said, write the vision, make it plain on tablets, so that a runner may read it. For there is a vision, still a vision for the appointed time. It speaks of the end and does not lie. If it seems to tarry, wait for it. It will surely come. It will not delay. Look at the proud. Their spirit is not right in them. But the righteous live by their faith. Don't worry, Habakkuk. Your answer is coming. It's not going to come in the time that you want. It's probably not going to look like you want, but an answer is coming. God has not abandoned God's people. God is going to take care of them. God sees that the proud are not right in their hearts, but that the righteous are clinging on to faithfulness, clinging on to the promises of God, keeping actual faith even when things seem impossible. God sees that the balance is out of whack, and God is going to set the balance right. Babylon is coming. Babylon is going to conquer Judah. And who the Babylonians take? They take the leadership. They take the rich people. They take the powerful people. They take the people who were doing the people-on-people violence. And they go off and they get left in exile for more than a generation before they're allowed to come back. The ledger gets righted in God's own time. God does take care of it. And in God's eyes, God does not delay. So there's the three-step process you see here that I think is instructive for us. And the first is that Habakkuk gets really passionate, gets really convicted at what he sees, and he cries out to God, which remember is okay, and then something happens in God's good time. And so if we look at the world and we see a world as it should not be, remember, friends, that we believe in something. We believe in God's power. We believe that God can overcome anything. We believe that God has already overcome the power of sin and death. We believe that God's Holy Spirit is already in the world, making ways where there were no ways. If you find yourself looking at the world and saying, well, I guess that's just how it is, that's not faith in God. That's nihilism. Who here has ever seen the movie The Big Lebowski? It's okay to admit this in church. This is a safe space. Okay, so character in The Big Lebowski, the nihilists. We are nihilists. We believe in nothing. We don't believe in nothing. We believe in something. We believe in the power of God. We believe that God cares about God's people and that God has the power to make things right. But it's not always going to look the way we want it to. It's not always going to come in the time that we think it should. But that should not stop us from looking at the world for what it really is. See the problems of the world. Look with the same eyes that Habakkuk saw, and actually see the world for the broken place that it is, rather than giving into the nihilism of, oh, I guess that's just how it is. Oh, it is what it is. No, it's not. There are deep problems in this world. A starvation, a genocide, a drug war on the American border, people still dying of HIV and AIDS, malaria is still a thing, drug addiction is still a thing, right? The world is not as it should be, and we need to see that and become as passionate about that as Habakkuk did. Look around our own city. Our own city suffers from chronic hopelessness. So many people who look at the big problems that our city faces and go, I guess that's just how it is. I guess we just can't have nice things. No, that's not faith in God. That's nihilism. We need to see with true eyes the problems of the world, and we need to be offended by them. As offended by them as Habakkuk is. So offended by what is wrong with the world that we too want to stand at the city gates, look up in the sky and go, what is going on? Why do people die of opiates? Why is there still HIV? Why does the people in the richest nation ever die of hunger every day? Why does that happen? And then step 3, which is the hardest, trust in God. God sees it too. That's part of the message here to Habakkuk. God's response to Habakkuk is, I see that too. And don't worry, I will not delay. And so we must trust, we must feel that same level of passion. Because part of who we are, if we take our faith in God seriously, is that we should be convicted by what we see in the world. We should be convicted that this world does not look like God's kingdom yet. In parts, in places, yes. But overall, the whole world, not yet. And that should convict us. That should make us angry. That should lead us to cry out and then respond by putting our faith in God, the power of God, the strength of God, who can set it right. God's answer to Habakkuk is, do not worry. I have got this. I will make this right, and it will not delay. That's a leap of faith, but that's what faith really is. Faith is not belief in some abstract being floating out in the sky that God exists. Actual faith, the way the righteous live by faith, is they trust in God's promises even when those promises look impossible. Even when the scale of the problems we see in the world look impossible. What faith in God means is we trust in God's power to overcome the impossible, and we commit our lives to be a part of God's overcoming of the impossible, because in reality, nothing is impossible for God. Feel that deep conviction. It's a part of what it means to truly be a person of faith, truly who we are. Stand on your watchtower and cry out to God, how long, O Lord? Then wait on God's answer, because God's answer will be mighty. God's answer will be powerful. God's answer will be the salvation and transformation of our lives and the world around us. Let us pray.